On December 18, 1944, in the early hours near the Belgian settlement of Krinkelt, a crew operating an 88mm POC 43 positioned themselves behind their formidable weapon. The gun stretched beyond 16 feet in length, a massive instrument of war. Its barrel could launch a 22-pound anti-armor projectile traveling at nearly 3,000 feet each second. Metal surfaces glistened with frozen moisture. The gunners' exhaled breath created visible clouds in the frigid air. Their wakefulness had begun at 3 o'clock that morning, as participants in Germany's massive surprise attack that would later be called the Battle of the Bulge. Klaus Richter, holding the rank of Oberfeldwebel, directed this anti-tank crew. At 26 years of age, he represented a seasoned combatant who had participated in fighting on the Eastern Front, where he had destroyed 11 Soviet tanks during the engagement at Kursk. For him and his team, the 88 represented more than mere armament. It embodied absolute reliability and superiority. During his 2 years participating in warfare, Richter had never encountered protective plating that could resist a direct strike from his gun at fighting distances. Neither the Soviet T-34 nor the British Churchill, and most certainly not the American Sherman, that motorized death chamber Germans termed a Tommy Cooker, could withstand it. Emerging from the early morning haze, the gunner observed activity. Down the forest pathway at roughly 300 meters, a Sherman tank broke through the wood's edge. Standard practice dictated their response. His loader, Gefreiter Hans Müller, was already turning the traverse mechanism, directing the lengthy barrel toward their goal. The ammunition handler inserted an armor-piercing shell into the breech opening. The whole process consumed 11 seconds. They had repeated this maneuver so frequently that verbal communication became superfluous. Müller positioned the targeting reticle on the Sherman's hull, concentrating on the region beneath the turret's foundation where American tank armor proved thinnest. The command came. The 88 discharged with tremendous force, its blast wave unsettling equipment and producing a pressure surge across the frozen landscape. The projectile traversed the intervening space in less than a third of 1 second. It deflected. The team observed the brilliant flash upon contact, the shell ricocheting upward at a severe angle before disappearing into the pale sky. Momentary silence fell across the crew. Müller examined his viewing apparatus, questioning whether he had miscalculated the space between them or the impact geometry. Yet his measurements remained accurate. 300 meters, nearly perpendicular targeting, a flawless employment according to all procedures. The Sherman continued its advance. Richter commanded a second attempt. The ammunition carrier moved mechanically, his hands functioning on training despite the bewilderment clouding his thinking. The breech mechanism shut with a metallic clang. Müller sent another round downrange. This time, they concentrated their full awareness on the impact zone. The shell contacted the Sherman's glacis plate with perfect accuracy. Again, the bright streak. Again, the deflection. The projectile, designed to penetrate 4 inches of defensive armor, should have transformed the crew to fragments, yet it bounced from the hull as though skipping over a water surface. The Sherman's turret began pivoting in their direction. What Klaus Richter and his personnel remained unaware of, information they could never have accessed, was that they confronted one of just 254 M4A3 E2 assault tanks manufactured in total. Americans designated this model the Jumbo. Its protective plating on the forward surfaces measured not the 2 inches of a standard Sherman, nor the 4 inches of improved variants. In critical areas, accounting for angle and additional welded layers, the thickness approached 7 inches of hardened metallic plate. The 88mm POC 43, the firearm that had characterized armored conflict on European battlefields, had finally encountered its equal. The actual question surrounding the following 30 seconds involved not crew survival. Rather, it concerned how many additional German gunners would experience this improbable Sherman before someone in the intelligence apparatus would acknowledge the claim. To comprehend the astonishment of that instance beside Krinkelt, one must recognize what the 88 mm represented to the German Wehrmacht. It constituted more than weaponry. It embodied strategic philosophy transformed into metal, the physical expression of Teutonic tactical mastery that had characterized 3 years of mechanized combat. The Flak 18, the initial 88 variant, had been conceived during the early 1930s period as anti-aircraft ordnance. Its elevated projectile velocity, necessary for reaching aircraft at elevation, provided extraordinary penetrative capability against surface adversaries. Throughout the Spanish Civil War, German Condor Legion personnel discovered they could annihilate Republican armor effortlessly. Wehrmacht leadership absorbed this knowledge. From 1940 onward, the 88 underwent transformation into specialized anti-armor configuration. The PAK-43, fielded beginning in 1943, advanced performance even more substantially. Its tungsten-layered rounds could penetrate 6 inches of defensive material at 1,000 meters. During standard battlefield distances spanning 300 to 500 meters, it could overcome every Allied tank type in operation. British Churchills, despite their substantial infantry support protection, remained vulnerable. Soviet T-34s, lauded for their angled construction, provided insufficient defense, and American Shermans qualified as universally acknowledged, demobilized coffins. The documentation proved unmerciful and extensively recorded. 1944 American Army investigation demonstrated that German 88 mm ordnance accounted for approximately 30% of Sherman casualties in Normandy operations, despite comprising below 10% of German anti-tank armaments. The firearm's maximum effective range surpassed 2,000 meters, permitting German teams to strike Allied vehicles before American 75 mm guns could respond. The destruction-to-loss comparison was catastrophic. For each 88 mm anti-armor piece neutralized, German personnel reported destroying an average of 7 Allied tanks. The troops operating 80s understood these numbers. Beyond that, they genuinely experienced them. The confidence generated from controlling the 88 reached absolute conviction. Instruction reinforced this competitive advantage. Weapons instructors emphasized that achievement required exclusively hitting the objective, never obtaining adequate penetration. Military procedure presumed that every Allied vehicle struck underwent destruction. Compiled battle reports reinforced this conviction repeatedly, engagement following engagement. This psychological conviction transcended the gun personnel themselves. Wehrmacht soldiers recognized that positioning an 88 meant stopping Allied vehicle progression. Leadership structured protective arrangements according to the gun's parameters, locating them at critical junctions and expected infiltration passages. A concealed yet quiet 88 might independently halt an opposing advance. Vehicle personnel harbored dread of them. Information gatherers pursued their location. Bombing raids targeted their destruction. During late 1944, as Germany's predicament intensified, the 88 signified one of the limited technological margins the Wehrmacht retained. German mechanized production lagged substantially compared to Allied manufacturing. The Panther and Tiger, although capable, demanded extensive upkeep and frequently required maintenance. However, the 88, whether mounted on a tank destroyer or deployed as transportable anti-tank ordnance, remained trustworthy, productive, and psychologically commanding. American vehicle operators designated them murder instruments. British personnel called them widow generators. USSR documents portrayed 88 defended territory as annihilation zones. Years of consistent results had validated these characterizations. It had eliminated additional Allied armor than any alternate German military system. Come December 1944, when the Wehrmacht embarked on its concluding desperate campaign inside the Ardennes, the 88 personnel moved ahead, carrying the conviction of personnel who had never encountered failure. That conviction would shortly collapse. Whereas German gunners proceeded with supreme assurance, American tank personnel entered battlefield engagement in 1944 carrying an entirely distinct emotional framework. They understood from empirical data that their M4 Sherman tanks faced disadvantaged circumstances. The Sherman resulted from a different approach, constructed in amounts Germany's production capacity could not approach, rather than engineered to overcome German advanced protection. This represented logical wartime technique, although it supplied marginal encouragement to occupants within these metal compartments. The Sherman's forward-facing shielding, in its most typical configuration, registered 2 inches at the hull and 3 inches across the rotating turret. Subsequent iterations, including the M4A1 using the 76mm cannon, expanded this to roughly 4 inches along the sloped glacis, accounting for its 47-degree inclination. These specifications remained sufficient battling most German mechanized platforms and all German anti-armor cannons from 1942 through early 1943. However, by late 1944, these dimensions had become risky historical remnants. An 88mm Pak-43 could penetrate 4 inches at 1,500 meters. The Sherman's forward protection could get breached from distances where American teams could not effectively reciprocate. The German Panther, equipped with an extended 75mm barrel, could destroy a Sherman from directly ahead at 1,000 meters, while demonstrating practical invulnerability to equivalent American fire at identical ranges. The Tiger, with its 88mm KWK-36, exemplified an even more pronounced disparity. American fighting methods addressed this disparity with harsh directness. Crew preparation prohibited Sherman personnel from participating in head-to-head combat with German superior armor whenever feasible. The recommended strategy involved deploying numerical advantage, repositioning to flank spots, and launching assault from perimeter positions or rearward locations where German armor presented vulnerability. Established practices indicated that 6 Shermans were required to consistently overcome 1 Panther. Warriors shortened it to an unpleasant saying, 5 Shermans to capture the Panther's focus, 1 to attack from behind. The reference Tommy Cooker or Ronson reflected the Sherman's inclination toward ignition if compromised. Earlier designs maintained ammunition adjacent to the hull sides, directly inside the channel of penetrating projectiles. Direct strikes frequently triggered explosive ignition of ammunition charges, creating catastrophic internal infernos. Occupants possessed roughly 30 seconds to vacate before inner temperatures exceeded survivable thresholds. Numerous did not succeed. Succeeding additions relocated ammunition storage beneath the rotating mechanism and equipped liquid-based extinguishing apparatus. Nonetheless, the characterization stayed. Loss information reinforced these anxieties. 1944. Investigation undertaken by the 3rd Armored Division discovered that 62% of casualty figures took place throughout the initial 30 calendar days of engagement. Inexperienced personnel unfamiliar with appropriate tactical implementation suffered excessively. However, even seasoned personnel encountered difficult scenarios. The mean period. A Sherman remained functional in intensive warfare equaled several weeks, sometimes individual calendar days. Personnel rotated through replacement vehicles with troubling regularity. Notwithstanding these circumstances, Shermans materialized continuously. American manufacturing capability generated approximately 50,000 M4 models throughout the conflict. German output generated approximately 6,000 Panthers and 1,300 Tigers over the equivalent span. The Sherman's material durability, simplified upkeep, and logistic efficiency signified that American armored units could perpetuate engagement indefinitely. German superior tanks, despite exceeding in destructive capacity and protective layering, invested considerable periods seeking maintenance components compared to participating in battle. This generated contradiction inside American tactical procedure. Throughout the battle, the Sherman achieved triumph by means of sheer quantity and endurance. Throughout individual engagements, personnel confronted terrifying probabilities each instance they faced German superior armaments. Personnel who participated in Normandy fighting, who traversed hedgerows while battling Panthers at knife-fighting separation, comprehended that their endurance resulted not from shielding, rather from rapidity, invisibility, and the probability that the subsequent anti-tank piece would misfire. Into these circumstances, during summer 1944, came 354 platforms that invalidated every presumption regarding American defensive capabilities. They represented Shermans by designation and configuration, yet their protective characteristics paralleled German superior platforms. The description was M4A3E2. Personnel merely referred to them as jumbos. Yet, on account of protection protocols, restricted manufacturing volumes, and hurried deployment, German intelligence personnel remained ignorant of their existence till regrettably late. The M4A3E2 assault platform surfaced not through deliberate arrangement, rather from pressing circumstance identified during spring 1944. When Allied command readied for Normandy operations, intelligence assessments presented troubling conclusions. Enemy positions hardened the French coastline with substantial fortifications, reinforced structures, reinforced positions, and stacked anti-tank obstacles. Breaking past these positions demanded armored vehicles enabling frontline infantry assault while tolerating punishment that would annihilate ordinary vehicles. The dilemma landed on General James Gavin's work desk, leading the Army Ordnance Division's Innovation Section. His remedy seemed straightforward. Acquire the dependable Sherman framework and connect maximum defensive material the suspension might sustain. Absolutely no fundamental reconstruction. Absolutely no prolonged assessment interval, merely supplementary metal welded into working designs. Fisher Tank Arsenal, situated in Grand Blanc, Michigan, obtained authorization in May 1944. Personnel evaluated that the M4A3 framework, utilizing its Ford GAAA V8, producing 500 horsepower, might sustain and supplementary 9,000 pounds of defensive material without fundamental mechanical destruction. The foundational hull shielding received duplication. The glacis coating received a supplementary 1 and 50/100th inches of hardened metal, elevating complete measurement to roughly 5 50/100 inches at 47-degree inclination. This resulted in productive measurement of approximately 7 inches against direct projectiles. The rotating turret underwent much more dramatic modification. The front section received elevation to 7 inches of pure metallic substance. The frame encasing the cannon measured approaching 8 inches at peak areas. External shielding underwent elevation from 1 50/100 inches to 3 inches. Also, the suspension garnered protective coverings to defend against hollow charge armaments. Complete mass expanded from 3 tons to 4 2 tons. Operating rapidity decreased from 30 miles per hour to roughly 2 to 2. The horsepower-to-mass proportion, presently marginal in ordinary Shermans, decreased to 14 horsepower per 1,000 pounds. This resulted in the jumbo responding gradually during initial movement and struggling with substantial inclines. Nevertheless, nothing else mattered if the armor functioned properly. Manufacturing commenced during June 1944 and finished by July. The restricted manufacturing of 354 platforms indicated both the immediacy of the operation and the functional restrictions of the strategy. Every jumbo required roughly 2,000 pounds of supplementary metal material during a period when each pound of defensive substance was appropriated toward competing requirements. Leadership determined to manufacture a restricted volume of specialized assault platforms rather than marginally enhance a comprehensive group. The preliminary 75mm M3 cannon received retention, a determination that would afterward demonstrate contentious. Weapons professionals contended that the jumbo's mission entailed receiving projectiles and establishing passages, not exchanging fire against enemy vehicles at distance. The reduced, diminished velocity 75 demonstrated superior explosive productivity for fortification destruction. Nevertheless, this meant that jumbo personnel possessed extraordinary shielding, while carrying weapons insufficient for the heavy German platforms they would certainly encounter. The opening jumbos appeared in Europe during late July 1944, weeks following the Normandy breakthrough. They underwent distribution in minimal amounts throughout multiple armored organizations rather than gathering in specialized units. The 2nd Armored Organization obtained 30. The 3rd Armored Organization obtained 34. The 4th Armored Organization, which would subsequently direct Patton's campaign moving eastward, obtained 22. This distribution signified that nearly every American tanker never witnessed a jumbo. Nearly every German intelligence personnel never recovered an undamaged specimen. Significantly, zero official technique existed regarding jumbo utilization. Company commanders obtained platforms carrying specifications that appeared nearly unbelievable, however, zero preparation for exploiting them. Certain utilized jumbos as initial assault components during metropolitan operations. Others positioned them as mobile fortifications throughout defensive deployments. A limited number of innovative commanders put them in the frontmost area of advancing columns, depending on the shielding to outlast the preliminary German assault and disclose opposing positions. The personnel commanding them were ordinary Sherman crews, not distinctively chosen or prepared. They learned their platform characteristics by means of practical trial and field adjustments, frequently while under fire. The mass distinction registered instantly. The jumbo accelerated gradually, encountered problems in waterlogged terrain, and expended gasoline excessively. However, during direct battle, the shielding surpassed projected capability. Crews documented strikes from German anti-armor guns that would have annihilated ordinary Shermans, yet produced merely dents and heat marks on the jumbo's outer surfaces. Information dispersed informally via personnel. Specific Sherman variants, equivalent externally to ordinary designs, provided virtually absolute frontal immunity. However, this intelligence remained anecdotal, limited inside American operations. German intelligence, previously swamped via the disintegration of France and tracking numerous opposing organizations, never identified the jumbo representing a distinct design requiring modified tactical strategy. The intelligence community's neglect to identify the jumbo Sherman represents one of the battle's most significant intelligence mistakes. It emerged not through incompetence, rather as an anticipated result of a military intelligence organization that endured systematic deterioration throughout 3 years of defeats, overextension, and accumulated outcomes of American counterintelligence tactics. Throughout late 1944, German military intelligence, termed Foreign Armies West, performed under essentially total obscurity. Germany's intelligence organization, the Abwehr, underwent infiltration via American personnel operating undercover and eventually incorporated into Nazi police forces earlier throughout the period. Long-distance reconnaissance platforms, essential for acquiring fighting intelligence regarding Allied activity, vanished from the atmosphere via overwhelming Allied flying dominance. The Luftwaffe could scarcely defend German locations, much less execute thorough reconnaissance of American rear regions where fresh apparatus would initially surface. Human intelligence systems throughout England and France underwent systematic dismantling. The achievement of Operation Fortitude, the American misdirection initiative during the D-Day invasion, demonstrated precisely how thoroughly German intelligence underwent penetration and deception. Personnel once commanding certainty regarding opponent capabilities now operated via fragments, mythology, and historical information. They comprehended Americans' created platforms in tremendous volumes. They recognized Britain was presenting modern variants carrying superior cannon. Nonetheless, the specifics, the particulars enabling tactical flexibility, stayed hidden. The Jumbo's restricted manufacturing ran counter to secrecy. 254 represented under 0.5% of complete Sherman output. Dispersed throughout numerous organizations within a zone running from Swiss territory to the Baltic coastline, they emerged with minimal regularity that preliminary accounts underwent dismissal as abnormalities. A German anti-tank group documenting that an 88mm shell deflected off a Sherman encountered higher probability of facing mistrust for inadequate marksmanship compared to acknowledgement of encountering an improved variant. Moreover, the Jumbo's visual presentation paralleled ordinary Shermans. Unlike the Churchill or the IS-2, distinguishable as differing tanks, the Jumbo kept the recognizable Sherman form. Throughout engagement separations spanning 300 to 500 meters, typically via obscurity, shrubbery, or reduced exposure, German personnel possessed mere moments for target recognition. The preparation delivering results through 3 years, Sherman equaled reduced armor equaled simple destruction, now betrayed them. Limited Jumbos receiving destruction and subsequent examination produced deceptive findings. If a Jumbo underwent destruction via side or rearward hits, places where shielding continued comparatively reduced, inspectors would notice ordinary Sherman development. If a Jumbo underwent disablement via mechanical difficulty or evacuation, extraction teams emphasized cannons, viewing equipment, and broadcast systems compared to methodically examining armor dimensions. The gradual character of the armor development intended that examination measurements might demonstrate variance without exhibiting the intentional modification. German battle procedure worsened matters. Throughout late 1944, Wehrmacht protective procedures stressed repositioning, deceptive assaults, and strategic reposition versus perpetual resistance. Anti-armor weaponry underwent placement to strike flanks and rearward areas, avoiding head-to-head confrontations. Each occasion a Jumbo surfaced and endured frontline strikes, German crews regularly concluded they had miscalculated angle or separation rather than challenging their core convictions regarding American defensive capability. The missing paperwork demonstrated significance. Allied security procedures maintained Jumbo information tightly restricted. Unlike ordinary Shermans, which had technical documentation retrieved throughout 1943 and 44, 0 Jumbo documents reached German administration. American personnel maintained directives to annihilate paperwork if capture appeared probable. The limited Jumbos misplaced completely underwent typically recovery by American personnel prior to German information teams executing thorough assessments. Perhaps most significantly, the time frame of the Jumbo's employment coincided with Germany's comprehensive military breakdown. Throughout summer and autumn 1944, German positions underwent staggering casualties resulting from Operation Bagration within the east. The annihilation of Group Center, the unsuccessful Falaise encirclement action, and the conquest of Romanian fuel supplies. Information personnel prioritized identifying dangers, confronting Germany's continuance, Soviet assaults, American aerial operations, and the anticipated breakthrough along the Rhine. An somewhat improved Sherman model, surfacing in minimal amounts throughout a zone containing hundreds of opposing platforms, simply didn't register as significant. Intelligence assessments spanning September continuing through November 1944 maintain zero reference to improved Sherman protection. Battle directives indicated worry regarding improved opponent anti-tank systems and air predominance, nonetheless maintained characterizing American vehicles as defenseless to German anti-tank weaponry throughout regular engagement separations. This intelligence mistake produced substantial psychological consequence. Each instance, German personnel experienced jumbos and observed their ammunition deflect. They encountered beyond tactical shock, intellectual disturbance. The 88 mm, the implement never disappointing them, unexpectedly appeared ineffective. Personnel doubted their personal competence. Had they inserted improper ammunition? Could the platform contain mechanical problems? The substitute, that American industry created protection matching German superior vehicles, remained implausible. By the interval, German Information Division received repeated confirmation of armored Shermans occurring December 1944. The Ardennes operation commenced. Throughout Germany's concluding offensive's disorder, with entire units isolated and information movement chaotic, arranged intelligence acquisition became unfeasible. Individual organizations modified independently. Nonetheless, absolutely no comprehensive defensive regulation tackled the jumbo menace. The inconsistency separating perception and German assumptions persisted till wartime conclusion. The comprehensive psychological consequence of the jumbo Sherman solidified throughout the opening interval of the Ardennes conflict, whenever German battle, to procedure. The interaction beside Krinkelt remained isolated. Throughout the Ardennes zone, extending from Monschau within northern areas through Echternach in southern positions, 88 mm personnel encountered a perplexing contemporary reality. December 16, 1944. Morning, elements of the initial SS Panzer organization encountered jumbos originating from personnel B, 33rd Armored Battalion, 3rd Armored Organization, neighboring the Belgian settlement of Elsenborn. The opposing group contained 5 Tigers and numerous POC-43 anti-armor systems positioned concerning trap American advancement, moving eastward from the encirclement zone. Topography supported the protecting force. Expansive regions demonstrating reduced camouflage, demanding opposing vehicles progress via foreseeable paths. 3 jumbos initiated the advancing column. Typical procedure would have demonstrated catastrophic. The Tigers and anti-armor guns maintained obvious zones spanning 1,000+ meters, yet the jumbo commanders, having discovered their platform possibilities throughout preceding operations, progressed with assurance. The opposing cannon initiated projectiles at 800 meters. The initial Tiger's 88 mm projectile impacted the preliminary jumbo's glacis at slight deflection. The shell penetrated the external applique level, nonetheless could not overcome the fundamental shielding. The collision transferred force via the crew zone, incapacitating the operator, yet the platform endured movement. The Tiger organization, bewildered via the objective's continuation, discharged again. The subsequent projectile contacted the turret peak. Once more, zero penetration. The jumbo's cannon operator, presently focused on the Tiger's discharge position, reciprocated. The 75 mm projectile, insufficient regarding frontal deterioration of Tiger's shielding, nonetheless contacted the German platform's cannon fastening with adequate impact to jam the rotational mechanism. Functionally neutralized, the Tiger withdrew. The residual opposing vehicles, witnessing a Sherman endure consecutive 88 mm strikes and continue participating, wavered. That hesitation forfeited their upper hand. The interaction disintegrated into chaotic near-range battle when American foot soldiers and supplementary platforms, both ordinary and jumbo designs, progressed into the opponent's zone. By midday, the opponent organization retreated, having eliminated 2 ordinary Shermans, yet neglecting to obstruct the armored progression. The 3 jumbos that led the engagement demonstrated multiple strike indicators covering their exteriors and tops. Absolutely 0 had undergone penetration regarding frontal positioning. Comparable sequences happened throughout the Bulge area neighboring Bastogne. Single jumbo, originating from the 4th Armored Organization's 37th Battalion, held a crossing throughout repeated opponent assaults. December 20th, the platform commanded by Personnel Sergeant William McVey endured 17 anti-armor projectiles spanning 6 periods. Opponent organizations convinced they battled permanent fortification versus movable platform ultimately circumvented the position rather than persist, dispersing ammunition uselessly. The psychological consequences extended via German formations. Fight accounts recovered via captured paperwork indicate expanding bewilderment regarding opponent armor capabilities. Individual records spanning late December conveyed opponent tank variants observed presenting improved forward protection, 88 mm precision unreliable, occurring beneath 500 meters. Recommend focusing fire at suspension and flank sections exclusively. The phrasing demonstrates consequence. German battle procedure had absolutely no background describing 88 mm precision as inconsistent. The system's productivity had been presumed, 0 interrogation. The emphasis on suspension and flank targeting expressed substantial modification in battle procedure. Confession that frontline contact had ceased signifying assured victory. Regarding American personnel, the jumbo delivered beyond material shielding, psychological freedom. Personnel who had invested weeks acknowledging their continuance stemmed from fortunate timing and repositioning, presently possessed shielding enabling standing and battling. This assurance transformed into battle aggression. Jumbos underwent deployment into zones where ordinary Shermans would have undergone withdrawal. They performed as gathering places regarding infantry, providing movable shelter regarding advancing soldiers, and served as psychological components whose occurrence modified opponent battle arrangements. Nevertheless, the jumbo's constraints persisted stark. External shielding, though enhanced toward 3 inches, continued defenseless regarding German 75 mm and 88 mm systems throughout regular battle ranges. Rearward shielding at 1.5 inches could undergo destruction, originating from reduced capacity anti-armor systems. The reduced repositioning capacity created jumbos defenseless regarding flanking approaches and demanding to retrieve if geography grew unfavorable. Furthermore, the 75 mm implement meant that jumbo couldn't consistently participate in direct confrontation regarding German superior platforms. Jumbo confronting Tiger or Panther inside available terrain possessed shielding superiority, though implement insufficiency. The exchange transformed into psychological examination. Could the jumbo progress toward immediate proximity positioning where the 75 might discover vulnerable places regarding German shielding? Or could the superior German platform eventually achieve side or turret positioning negating the jumbo's security? The resolution hinged upon geography, personnel capabilities, and frequently absolute fortune. Nevertheless, the truth that comparable interactions became fighting concerns instead of definite American losses represented extraordinary modification. Throughout 3 years, American battle procedure acknowledged insufficiency throughout a specific platform compared to specific platform conflict. The jumbo, via restricted amounts and important compromises, questioned that postulate. Absolutely inadequate regarding modifying wartime results, yet adequate regarding modifying combat execution, and the quantity of personnel enduring moving beyond 1945. The jumbo Sherman's participation throughout winter 1944, extending into 1945, demonstrated both extraordinary possibilities and natural restrictions. When the Ardennes conflict moved eastward throughout late January, American armored organizations collected fight assessments attempting evaluating what personnel underwent emotionally. The jumbo could withstand, yet withstanding independent didn't guarantee victory. Casualty information demonstrated striking findings. Ordinary M4 platforms throughout heavy conflict throughout the Bulge underwent casualty amounts reaching 40% throughout restricted locations. Jumbos functioning throughout equivalent situations and regularly initiating equivalent assaults underwent casualty numbers beneath 15%. The distinction resulted primarily from frontal armor improvement. Each incident, jumbos underwent destruction. Post-war investigation regularly documented strikes toward external surfaces, rearward areas, or complete mechanical breakdown instead of frontal deterioration. Nevertheless, these amounts concealed more complicated battle reality. The jumbo's restricted implement capacity signified it couldn't conclusively participate in German superior vehicle engagement. Throughout circumstances featuring jumbo confronting Panthers or Tigers, the standard result involved standstill or withdrawal versus American accomplishment. The jumbo could endure the exchange, enabling its personnel to persist and participate yet again. Nevertheless, it couldn't destroy the opponent platform which had neglected to destroy it. This restriction motivated urgent field adjustments. Starting January 1945, selected jumbos underwent acquisition of 76mm systems salvaged via wrecked ordinary Shermans. The transformation occurred unofficially, carried out via upkeep organizations utilizing whatever resources existed. The extended elevated velocity 76mm supplied jumbo's possibility regarding German superior vehicle conflict at ranges permitting their advanced frontal security utilization. Roughly 40, continuing 50 jumbo underwent this improvement, though precise figures stay uncertain, resulting from the deceptive character of the modifications. Personnel complemented the results. Jumbo utilizing 76mm could participate regarding Panthers practically as counterpart, showing equivalent shielding and satisfactory implement capability. Regarding Tigers, the mismatch stayed complicated. Nonetheless, absolutely no longer implausible. These customized jumbos represented what American battle procedure required beginning Normandy. Platform that could simultaneously withstand and terminate in immediate conflict regarding German powerful vehicles. Nevertheless, concurrent with these modifications, the battle situation underwent modification. Throughout February 1945, German opposition in western areas crumbled. The abortion of the Ardennes operation consumed Germany's remaining repositionable capabilities. Fuel deficiencies incapacitated even undestroyed German platforms. Opponent air predominance signified German armor could scarcely progress throughout daylight moments. The battle difficulty which the jumbo underwent construction resolving, breaking via arranged opponent defenses, underwent resolution alternatively via massive numerical and supply superiority. The jumbo's psychological consequence, nonetheless, persisted past its battle application. German personnel who underwent engagement regarding heavily protected Shermans conveyed that background eastward. The complete assurance defining 88mm systems previous throughout the conflict underwent replacement via hesitation and uncertainty. Intelligence information throughout February and March 1945 ultimately recognized heavily protected Sherman variants. Yet, by the interval, the guidance came afterward the capability to shape German battle procedure and significant approach. Regarding American personnel, the jumbo's presence delivered something more precious compared to its restricted amounts recommended. Verification that American production could create shielding equaling German principles when essential. The account that American vehicles lacked innate superiority, that personnel must recognize defenselessness as the exchange for rapidity and dependability underwent conclusive devastation. Later, American platform designs, containing the M-26 Pershing powerful vehicle arriving in restricted amounts throughout early 1945, represented findings discovered originating from the jumbo application. The jumbo furthermore impacted post-war battle procedure. The contradiction separating security, implement capability, and repositioning capacity which the jumbo symbolized turned into essential toward American platform improvement doctrine. The knowledge that personnel required protection adequate for surviving the starting minutes of conflict, despite mobility or scope expenses, created improvement regarding the M46, M47, and ultimately the M48 Patton platforms organizing American armored military strength via the 1950 timeframe. Yet, perhaps the jumbo's maximum important inheritance contained symbolic representation. It demonstrated American commercial adaptability, the capability to identify difficulty, create solution, and utilize it in quantities demonstrating substance, all spanning months rather than generations. The reality that merely 354 underwent manufacturing might seem unimportant compared to complete Sherman manufacturing surpassing 49,000. Nevertheless, those 354 appeared specifically when essential, functioned specifically as necessary, and endured at percentages safeguarding hundreds of American lives. Personnel who participated in jumbos conveyed their understanding eastward inside serene intervals. Veterans, recounting continuously, emphasized the assurance emerging from recognizing their shielding could safeguard them, the battle vigor it permitted, and the appreciation they experienced regarding the architects and manufacturers who created their platforms. Regarding personnel previously acknowledging that continuance resulted primarily from fortune, the jumbo offered something priceless: authority over their personal existence, the capacity to persist and participate instead of merely hoping remaining unhurt. The German military's reply regarding the jumbo Sherman, or alternatively, their incapacity to reply successfully, illuminated the extensive deterioration of Wehrmacht military and production capability throughout the battle's remaining intervals. The intelligence mistake that abandoned 88mm personnel, uninformed regarding improved American shielding, manifested the broader disintegration of a fighting organization that underwent forfeited capability to modify to quickly changing battle circumstances. Retrieved German documents throughout early 1945 demonstrate an organization in contradiction. Preparation resources regarding anti-armor personnel, maybe documents created throughout February and March, persisted listing ordinary Sherman protection parameters. Cannon performance charts delivered absolutely no information intended for battling heavily protected variants. Battle guidelines presumed that 88mm systems persisted, containing their superior standing, contrary to each Allied vehicle type. The gathered fighting information assembled via 3 years of productive utilization couldn't fast incorporate this different truth. Distinct German organizations, which underwent engagement regarding jumbos, modified via demanding individual circumstances. Fighting accounts originating from organizations which participated throughout the Ardennes or bordering the Rhine display changing procedure. Expanded priority regarding flank strikes, organizing amid numerous anti-armor systems striking concurrently via differing routes, and concentration regarding position possibilities allowing near-range contact regarding external shielding. Nevertheless, these findings continued localized, communicated informally via organizations, as opposed to dispersed throughout established procedure. The failure to modify at the production stage demonstrated much more damaging. German platform designers maintained comprehension via information accounts and questioning of obtained American personnel that improved Sherman variants existed. Nevertheless, throughout late 1944, German production had lost the capability regarding responsive modification. Manufacturing locations underwent persistent bombing runs. Elementary components weren't obtainable. The workforce encompassed progressively enslaved individuals possessing restricted specialty abilities and zero desire maintaining manufacturing quality. Schedules regarding upgrading German anti-armor implement capacity existed. The PaK-44, much more powerful 88mm kind, underwent active creation. Cutting-edge ammunition kinds, consisting sophisticated armor-piercing materials, assured superior capability versus thick shielding. Nevertheless, absolutely zero of these modifications reached fighting personnel in important quantities. Manufacturing locations which must have produced them transformed into destruction. The train systems which should have transported them underwent disabled via American aerial destruction. This production inability signified that German anti-armor personnel throughout March and April 1945 underwent battling with essentially equivalent systems and ammunition they possessed starting 1943. The 88mm implement that persisted controlling battlefields spanning 3 years presently throughout particular scenarios versus particular targets demonstrated insufficiency regarding Wehrmacht troops who depended on commercial superiority in order to counterbalance numerical disadvantage. This demonstrated psychological tragedy. German participant documents throughout the battle's remaining intervals repeatedly mention engagements regarding American vehicles that could not undergo destruction regarding forward positioning. The terminology demonstrates consequence. Instead of describing particular platform kind, participants portrayed a comprehensive incident, a dissolution within the trustworthy association regarding contacting and destroying that distinguished previous warfare. This recommends that even personnel which experienced jumbo absolutely no completely recognized they underwent encountering, viewing it alternatively as random, unfortunate timing or system breakdown versus a methodical American possibility. The psychological consequence lengthened past anti-armor personnel. German foot soldiers whose dedication regarding keeping defensive areas regularly hinged upon assurance that aiding 88mm systems could prevent Allied vehicles, commenced questioning whenever that premise showed untrue. If American platforms could endure strikes originating from the murder implements, if they could progress despite focused anti-armor fire, subsequently protective positions morphed toward dangers versus fortitudes. This disintegration of assurance motivated the Wehrmacht's expedited collapse within Western areas throughout March and April 1945. Organizations which could have battled determinedly throughout 1943 or 44, convinced within their implements and procedure, alternatively decided reposition or giving up. The jumbo's involvement inside this disintegration continued roundabout however quantifiable. It wasn't the shielding specifically which terminated German opposition, rather the knowing that perhaps Germany's many trustworthy, the knowing that perhaps Germany's most trustworthy implement could demonstrate failure. Post-war German military evaluation carried out via previous Wehrmacht personnel cooperating regarding American military specialists recognized the jumbo being a meaningful battle shock. Documentation indicated that the inability regarding identifying and modifying toward improved American shielding displayed a comprehensive inability regarding German military intelligence and production flexibility. The knowing that 354 platforms could generate disproportionate psychological consequences via shock and regional authority impacted post-war conflict period talks regarding military deception and the consequence of technological shock. Regarding the 88mm personnel specifically, personnel resembling Oberfeldwebel Klaus Richter, who made it through the conflict. The recollection of projectiles deflecting off Sherman exteriors continued vivid decades afterward. Throughout conversations performed throughout the 1960s and 70s periods, personnel consistently portrayed the astonishment and questioning of viewing their greatest trustworthy implement demonstrate failure. Certain questioned regardless of whether they underwent supplied defective ammunition. alternate individuals questioned if their systems underwent damage. The replacement, that American production could quietly utilize superior shielding in sufficient amounts regarding significance, questioned their comprehension of the conflict they underwent. The jumbo consequently transformed into component of the comprehensive account of German military disintegration, representation of precisely how battle superiority and advanced equipment could undergo negation via production capability, battle shock, and the gathering outcomes of extended struggle. It wasn't a transformative implement modifying the conflict's result. Nevertheless, it demonstrated the implement that demonstrated precisely how significantly German benefits underwent degradation and precisely how thoroughly American production and battle modification finished spaces that previously seemed unbridgeable. The narrative of the jumbo Sherman finishes absolutely no via mathematical information or battle investigation, rather via the personnel who functioned inside them and the personnel who encountered them. The three 54 platforms created spanning June and July 1944 performed with approximately 1,270 American personnel inside conflict situations. The substantial majority persisted throughout the conflict, a continuance percentage dramatically greater compared to their counterparts functioning inside ordinary Shermans. This straightforward reality demonstrates continuance. Households spared anguish. Futures that progressed beyond 1945. Personnel Sergeant William McVey that held a crossing neighboring Bastogne regarding 6 periods whilst his jumbo underwent 17 strikes, came back eastward toward Pennsylvania following the conflict. He functioned like a device specialist regarding 37 intervals, raised 4 of kids, and scarcely communicated regarding his conflict background. Each instance he performed, throughout conversations obtained throughout the 1980 periods, he emphasized absolutely no bravery, rather comfort. The intense appreciation he underwent regarding shielding that safeguarded him whenever protection seemed unattainable. His account underwent duplicated hundreds of periods. Jumbo personnel returned domestic transporting a distinct mental load compared to alternate tankers. They underwent survival absolutely no via fortune or tactical repositioning, instead via creation and metal. The endurance remorse which troubled numerous conflict participants underwent decreased via the understanding that their security demonstrated authentic. Their endurance obtained via American production capability versus chance happening. This distinction, delicate nevertheless considerable, impacted precisely how jumbo participants underwent handling their conflict instances. The German personnel which underwent engagement regarding jumbos and survived transported distinct recollections. The shock regarding observing projectiles deflect. The instant whenever procedure fell short and preparation demonstrated insufficient remained unpleasant. Certain, resembling Klaus Richter, invested intervals questioning their private capability, questioning if they had somehow demonstrated failure in that instance beside Krinkelt. Solely decades afterward, whenever specialists demonstrated the jumbo's parameters and restricted manufacturing, did participants comprehend that their systems hadn't demonstrated failure via defect or incompetence, rather had basically encountered shielding surpassing their capability regarding penetration. This disclosure transported its personal mental difficulty. Convenience that they had absolutely no demonstrated failure personally, mixed regarding resentment toward the intelligence inability that abandoned them ready. The knowing that American production could manufacture equivalent platforms in quantities demonstrating significance, whereas German production lagged sustaining manufacturing regarding current designs, reinforced the account of unavoidable destruction, which numerous German participants transported eastward inside serene intervals. The jumbo's position inside recorded background transformed via periods. Right after conflict, it underwent overpowered via the introduction of the M-26 Pershing and the comprehensive account of American platform creation. Armed forces publications created throughout the 1950s period scarcely highlighted it, focusing alternatively regarding the widely manufactured ordinary Sherman and the striking nevertheless restricted Pershing deployments. The jumbo appeared like addendum, engaging variant which materialized definitely late and inside absolutely insufficient amounts regarding significance. This perspective underwent modification throughout the 1970s and 80s intervals when specialists acquired entry toward German documents and performed extensive discussions regarding participants via both competing parties. The collected mass of accounts depicting jumbo's enduring strikes, which must have demonstrated fatal, the battle modifications their presence demanded, and the psychological consequence they generated motivated reappraisal. The jumbo surfaced being instance examination, demonstrating precisely how minimal amounts of advanced equipment, properly utilized in receiving shock, might accomplish, consequences disproportionate toward their volume. Contemporary armor specialists acknowledge the jumbo being transitional creation, connection amongst the widely manufactured moderate platform doctrine controlling American procedure via 1944 and the powerful platform procedure which would surface throughout the post-war interval. Its compromises, exchanging repositioning capability regarding security, maintaining insufficient implement capability, demonstrated the complexity regarding stabilizing the multiple fundamental characteristics of platform creation. Nevertheless, its accomplishment within the capability for which it underwent creation, enduring fire and beginning assaults, verified the proposition of customized variants inside a typical framework group. The jumbo, furthermore, provides recollection that technological shock, perhaps at minimal scope, might produce fighting consequences. 354 platforms could not modify the conflict's result. Nevertheless, they might modify precisely how battles progressed, precisely how personnel participated, and the number of personnel continue toward domestic life. Throughout the equation of conflict, in which individual existences usually disappear into mathematical totals, the jumbo demonstrates significance, the knowing that safeguarding soldiers, perhaps at the price of alternative capability characteristics, remained justified the production expense. The concluding jumbo fight activity took place throughout late April 1945, when American organizations advanced eastward inside southern Germany. Singular jumbo originating from the 4th Armored Organization, its exterior scarred via dozens of strike indicators gathered spanning 9 intervals of combat, initiated a column eastward inside the municipality of Regensburg. Opponent opposition stayed marginal. The conflict would terminate spanning 14 days. The personnel, depleted and mentally detached, parked their platform inside the settlement plaza and postponed guidance which didn't arrive. The conflict basically terminated around them. That jumbo persisted the conflict completely unharmed. It underwent eventually delivered toward American territory, utilized temporarily regarding preparation afterward, scrapped throughout the 1950 periods while American battle procedure advanced toward more recent designs. Absolutely zero comprehensive unique jumbo survives inside museums presently, though select improved varieties persist. The platforms which underwent enduring punishment designed regarding eliminating, which safeguarded people via metal and creation, underwent dismantled and transformed into metal. Their components reused regarding Serene-era products. Nevertheless, the recollection continues inside the descriptions of personnel which commanded them and encountered them. Within the fight accounts which documented their unlikely continuance, within the recordings which demonstrate Sherman configurations displaying strike indicators which must have created fatality. The jumbo Sherman remained absolutely the platform which obtained the conflict. Nevertheless, it demonstrated the platform which demonstrated American armor might persist and participate, that security demonstrated feasible, and that production capability, rapidly employed toward pressing difficulties, might safeguard existences, perhaps throughout conflict's remaining despairing intervals. Again, beside Krinkelt, that December morning throughout 1944, Oberfeldwebel Klaus Richter witnessed the impossible Sherman's turret move eastward regarding his location. His personnel began preparing regarding movement, regarding repositioning, and attempting yet once more originating from an alternative location. The 88mm implement that had absolutely no demonstrated failure had recently disappointed double. The procedure that had maintained them regarding 3 intervals underwent fractured spanning 30 moments. The conflict would persist regarding 5 extra intervals. Nevertheless, in that instance, the assurance underwent extinguished. They underwent confronted something contemporary, something their preparation hadn't equipped them regarding, something German intelligence hadn't cautioned them regarding. They underwent confronted 7 inches of American metal, and they underwent discovered too late that the period of the 80s dominance underwent finishing. The jumbo underwent performing specifically what it underwent creation regarding. It underwent persisted, and via persisting it underwent demonstrated a contemporary reality regarding the conflict, that American production, whenever directed and critical, might manufacture shielding equaling Germany's greatest. Absolutely no within overwhelming amounts. Absolutely no adequate to modify the conflict's result. Nevertheless adequate regarding significance toward the personnel which climbed eastward inside these platforms and returned domestic.